Hey everybody, this is Bernie Gartland. The name of our program is the IRS Fix, brought to you by the Gartland Group. I'm Bernie Gartland, tax attorney with the Gartland Group, and Tim Berry, who also is a tax attorney with the Gartland Group. I have in my hand a decision that was just handed down on July the 18th, 2014. It's rather complicated, and we're going to simplify it. First of all, this is pertaining to California. So if you're from Delaware or New Hampshire or Hawaii, it doesn't apply. So you can listen for your own information, but let's talk about this. There was an audit. The IRS came with a decision that the taxpayer owed money on an audit for their tax return. Nobody notified California, and what happened 12 years later?
What happened 12 years later is the person got a little love letter in the mail saying they owed a ton of money to California. Now, keep in mind, this person filed the tax return 12 years ago, and then 12 years after they filed the initial tax return with the IRS and the Franchise Tax Board, they get the love letter from the Franchise Tax Board saying, you owe us more money. Bernie, what happened to the statute of limitations? What's the statute of limitations?
Well, the statute of limitations is when you get audited by the Internal Revenue Service and you notify the state of California, they have 2 years to do an assessment. If you don't notify them and the IRS notifies them, they have 4 years. But in this case, neither the taxpayer nor the IRS notified California of the change of the audit.
Yeah, it's amazing. I think the IRS, I think, waited 9-10 years to notify the Franchise Tax Board, and now since the taxpayer never notified the Franchise Tax Board, the Franchise Tax Board could take up to 4 years to go after this poor soul.
Right.
So a lot of people were thinking, oh, the statute of limitations is a 3-year time period. Statute of limitations is a 6-year time period. And Bernie's going to get upset if I mention collections, but I'm not.
Not collections.
I know. So everyone thinks that there's certain fixed statutes of limitation for the IRS or the FTB to go after you. Au contraire, in this particular fact pattern, and this fact pattern happens a lot, by the way.
It does.
If you're audited by the IRS and you don't notify the Franchise Tax Board, the statute could go conceivably 10-20 years, and this case is a great example of 12 years later.
How much in interest?
The interest alone in this situation, because it related back the 12-year time period, was $12,000.
Just in interest alone. That's not even the tax or the penalties. So here's the case. If you're audited by the IRS and there's a final determination, that's not your final step. You have to do something else if you're a California resident. You can either file a 540X, which is an amendment tax return, or send that report that the IRS gave you that changed your tax return federally to the Franchise Tax Board. They then have 4 years to assess you. But for heaven's sakes, when you make sure that you just don't have in your mind, oh boy, I went through this IRS audit, now everything's done. It isn't done. 12 years later, the Franchise Tax Board came after these people. Don't let this happen to you.
You know, and Bernie, it just comes back to the basic concept. A lot of people, they hate dealing with tax issues. We have people bring in unopened envelopes all the time, boxes full of them. Don't stick your head in the sand. It's just going to cost you and your family a lot of money. Let the Franchise Tax Board know if there's been a change on the IRS audit. Owing taxes isn't the end-all, be-all. We have so many solutions on how to cure that problem.
Right.
But the key is to make the IRS and FTB aware of what's happening, and then we can work on the issue.
Yeah, and if you're notifying the Franchise Tax Board, send it certified mail return receipt so you have a record of it. It's very, very important because things get lost. So we'll talk about collections some other time. But remember, here's the salient point. If you're being audited or get audited by the Internal Revenue Service, your job, your task is not over. You have one more step, and that is to notify or correct the issue with the Franchise Tax Board. If not, you're going to be out there making your money, and all of a sudden, 5, 6, 7, 10 years, 12 years later, the Franchise Tax Board is saying, oh, you got audited 10 years ago, now you owe this amount of money. Don't let this happen to you. It doesn't have to happen to you. So, is that a wrap?
I think that's a wrap.
I think that's a wrap. So you have information, go with it. Bernie Gartland, Tim Berry, it's a wrap.